First kiss in front, first kiss from battling away Starflight with Chalmers, but first kiss. Do you remember yours? Mine was Sarah Kettridge.
This is Legends with Bevo, thanks to Bet Odyssey, Renelec Electrical Services, and Anytime Fitness Glenelg. And now, here's your host, Bevo.
Yes, welcome to another edition of Legends with Bevo. Today we're down here at the beautiful Junction Hotel in Morphettville, and what a pleasure it is to be joined by an absolute legend when it comes to race calling. He's called a number of Bay Sheffields, a number of races as well, and he's involved with Racing.com, doing a wonderful job as presenter there. The great Terry McAuliffe, great to have Legends with Bevo, mate.
Thanks, Bevo. Thanks for having me along.
Absolute pleasure. Now, obviously, a couple of days' time, it's the big race. It's the race that stops the nation, the Melbourne Cup. Who do you think the ones are to watch? And obviously, it's incentivised as a favourite. You know, I think, is that the one to watch? Or there's some others there as well that we could see that, obviously Melbourne Cup, you just never know, do you? So,
no, you don't. Like you said, it's the race that stops the nation, though. This is an incredible week, the whole week. Derby Day on Saturday, Melbourne Cup Day Tuesday, Oaks Day Thursday, and then Stakes Day next Saturday. So, but yeah, it's probably all about Tuesday for those that aren't really into the races, and I think Incentivise is certainly the horse to beat, the favourite. Peter Moody's done a super job in the short time he's had the horse, but it's an incredible story. Had 3 runs up in Queensland and basically did nothing, and then all of a sudden he started on this winning run 9 starts ago for his former trainer and now part owner Stephen Truday. He won 6 races in a row for Stephen, and then he sold a large portion of the horse, and the new ownership group wanted to send the horse to Melbourne to Peter Moody, and he's ticked every box for Moods. He won the McAuliffe Diva, the Turnbull, the Caulfield Cup, so he goes in likely as the raging hot favourite and certainly the horse to beat.
and in terms of some of the other ones as well, because as I mentioned, you just never know with the Melbourne Cup. Last year, Twilight Payment was a rank outsider, and of course, good old Michelle Payne on Prince of Penzance from a few years ago, 100 to 1. So you never know Melbourne Cup. See, it's such an open race.
Yeah, absolutely. And Twilight Payment, he's there again, trying to go back to back in the Melbourne Cup. So you have to respect him. Look, Kira Ma and David Eustace, they're very hard to beat in staying races anywhere where they turn up with their horses. Of course, they won the Derby on Saturday with Hototsu, and they've got a number of runners in the Cup, and they've got a couple down near the bottom which I think can run well. Grand Promenade and Floating Artist, so I think they're 2 others to maybe have a look at. Great House was really impressive, winning at Flemington on Saturday and earning the right to run in the Cup on Tuesday. So from the Chris Waller yard, I think he's there with a good chance as well. So like you say, the more you look into it, the more horses you can come up with, but I think ultimately Incentivises the horse to beat.
Yeah, can't wait. I know it's obviously only a couple of minutes, but it's always, everyone just loves the build-up to the Melbourne Cup, so bring that on for sure.
Absolutely.
Now let's go back to your journey, Tez. It's obviously been a legendary caller of the Bay Sheffield and horse racing for a number of years, and as I mentioned, doing really good things now with Racing.com. But where did the passion sort of begin as a caller? Tell us about that and what made you decide you want to be a caller.
Yeah, look, it was a bit of a sliding door moment that I got into race calling, but I did grow up at Morphettville, and I had horses over the back fence, and I had a real love for the animal. That's how it all really started for me, the absolute love of the horse. And Dad was a putter, so he always had the races on, and I was always listening to the races with Dad, and I would wander down to the stables around the corner from home as well and spend some time down there. And I guess I just sort of tuned my own style and my ear just listening to the great race callers over the journey when I was a youngster growing up. But as I said, it was a sliding door moment, really. I was working in the bank when I left school, and my best mate in the bank, Peter Reardon, his dad was a bookie, so we used to hang out a bit together and go to the races together. And as a bit of fun in downtime in the bank, we were in head office for the Commonwealth Bank. I'd be doing these phantom race calls while we were waiting for customers to come in, and Peter thought, there was something there with what I was doing, and he told his dad about me, and his dad, Paul, set it up for me to start calling trials at Weagle Oval, not far from Morphettville, just at Plimpton, and that's where it began on a Sunday morning. And from there I went to calling the trials at Globe Derby Park on a Wednesday night and greyhound trials at Gawler on a Friday night. So I sort of made the sacrifice to go out of my way and do that while I was working in the bank, and then after about probably a couple of years of calling trials, 5AA were doing the races here in South Australia at the time, and they were looking for another race caller to put on. They were looking to put on a cadet race caller. They heard about this kid calling trials around the place in Adelaide, and they got me in for a chat, and the job was mine if I wanted to take it. So Mum and Dad weren't too sure about me resigning from the bank, but that's what I did, and I followed my dream, and here we are, more than 35 years later with, a lot of great memories behind me.
And in terms of the Bay Sheffield, where did that how did that come about?
Yeah, look, when I started race calling, I had a couple of blokes that were unbelievable and still are great mates, and I can call them friends. And Bruce McAuliffe, the absolute doyen of sports broadcasting, probably in the world, not just our country. Bruce was fantastic for me early and still is today. I chat with Bruce on a regular basis when I've got something I want to discuss, and Mark Haston was the other. And Mark's dad, he had a group of runners that he prepared for the running season here in Adelaide, which basically runs from October till about April. The main event is the Bay Sheffield down at Collie Reserve. But the man calling the athletics at the time, Terry Cotton, he was looking to get out of it, and they needed someone to fill his shoes. And Mark's dad Keith suggested that maybe Terry might be interested in coming along and having a crack, and so out I went, and that was in the early 1990s, and I've got nearly 30 years now calling the athletics here in SA behind me as well.
What's been, I guess, starting with the horse racing, what's been some of your memorable moments as a caller, Tess?
Look, there's a lot of great memories. I guess you'd have to put right at the top Black Caviar, when she came here to Adelaide twice in 2012. We just spoke about Incentivised, trained by Peter Moody, and Peter Moody was amazing with this mare. He knew that she was more than just a champion racehorse that he was training. He knew that she was like just so great for the racing game. He put racing on the front page with this great mare. They appeared on news services, not just in the sports stories. She was appearing, basically at the top of news stories. Everyone wanted a piece of Black Caviar, and Moods travelled all around the country. She raced a lot in Queensland, Peter Moody's old home state. She raced in New South Wales, obviously in Victoria where she was trained, but Moods brought her here to Adelaide for 2 races. The Robert Sangster, now known as the TAB Classic, which she won. That was her 20th career win, and then she came back a fortnight later and won the Goodwood win number 21. And as we know, she went on to win another 4 races, including that famous race at Royal Ascot in England, and finished her career with an unblemished record, 25 out of 25. So that has to sit right at the top, getting the chance to call that great mare.
And in terms of the Bay Sheffield, obviously you've called some absolute legends that have gone on to do bigger and better things. So it'd be hard to choose. But what's a couple of your favourite Bay Sheffield calls and why?
Yeah, look, probably would maybe be the women's Bay Sheffield final. Nova Perez actually won in the mid-90s, and she was only a young lady at the time, and she then went on and, of course, represented Australia both at Olympics and Commonwealth Games. And I think about Nova because I was actually fortunate to call at the Commonwealth Games in 1998 in KL for Channel 9. And so after calling Nova win the Bay Sheffield, a few years later, there I was calling her win the 200 at the Commonwealth Games in Kuala Lumpur. So that was a pretty special memory. And Lauren Hewitt was another one who I called a lot over the journey, with times that I was fortunate to call away from the Bay Sheffield and those sort of events here in SA. And as I said, I mentioned the KL Games, the Commonwealth Games there, and I likewise did Melbourne in 2006. And Lauren Hewitt, I called Lauren a lot, and she won a women's Bay Sheffield as well. So they're probably the 2 special ones that stand out.
In terms of calling now, Tez, I've called swimming, NBL1, and also some Stanford, and it's very tough doing play-by-play calling. But I've just got so much respect for not only callers that do the Bay Sheffield, but also horse racing as well. It's got to be one of the hardest things. What sort of tips do you have for people that might be interested in becoming race callers, and how do you do it? Because you've got to remember all the horses, all the runners' names and numbers and everything. And so how do you actually do it? Obviously, you mentioned a couple of mentors in Mark Haston and Bruce, but it must be one of the hardest things to learn. Yeah, well, Bruce, as we know, is big on preparation, and that was probably one of the things that he instilled with me right from day dot. And if you do your preparation and you're ready to go, you then trust your own ability, and it should be okay. When you're calling, really, when I first started calling, I was calling to a radio audience. I wasn't calling to a TV audience. So a radio audience is probably a little bit easier, but also it also teaches you're trying to call and paint the picture the best way you possibly can for the person that actually can't see it. So with that,
you need to be accurate. And so when I say accurate, apart from getting names right, you need to get margins right as well. That's important. If you're not there able to see it, if a horse is 2 lengths in front, you need to make sure you say it's 2 lengths in front. It's not 4 lengths in front, which makes you think if you're on the leader and it's 4 lengths in front, I'm going to win. But it's a bit different if you're only 2 lengths in front, because that margin can be eaten into pretty quickly. So that's the way that I first really got going with calling. That, I was painting the picture the best way I possibly can. And when you're calling, you're just trying to tell the story. So it's almost like reading a story to one of your children, the beginning, the start, and you get to the end of the race and, the end. And accuracy is important, whether it be getting those names right, getting those margins right, and you've also got to be clear. And when I first started out, one of the great things I did, I actually went and spent 6 months with the late Vaughan Harvey with his radio school, and he was fantastic for me and taught me about using my voice and talking so people can really understand exactly what you're trying to say.
Yeah, no, that's very good tips as well. So, and like you mentioned, it's you've got to be able to speak like fast because the race is so quick, but then also clear and so
it's not so much fast, and that's what always people think, that we talk fast, but really it's because you don't stop. You're telling the story from start to finish, and you don't get a break in between. Like if you're watching the football, well, you're watching the cricket, you can sort of have a break in between balls or in between plays, but with the race call, you just got to keep going the whole time. It is a tough gig. It is a tough gig, but when you're calling play-by-play and you've got someone else you're working with, that makes it a lot easier. But when you're a broadcaster of racing, you're the only one there. You're doing it one out. It's a lonely place, and it's a lonely place if you get into trouble as well, because there's no one you can sort of tap on the shoulder or tap on the leg to take over. So anyway, there's just some of the challenges that go with the game.
Well, speaking of challenges, we love hearing the big stuff ups, and over the years we've seen some absolute beauties. And I remember a couple of years ago it was a classic. I think it was Jimmy Jakes. Poor guy's voice it's legendary. And has there been any times where you've had a couple of embarrassing moments as a caller, Tess?
Yeah, look, again, I said about preparation that, Bruce instilled in me right from day dot. And preparation also includes making sure you're in the box well and truly on time to learn the horses on the way to the gates. But there have been occasions where, I've been stuck downstairs or, just getting caught downstairs and then rushing up to the box. And if you get there and your breath isn't quite right and then they jump, very quickly you can run out of breath as well. Jimmy was a bit different. Jimmy actually had very bad bout of laryngitis, and he probably shouldn't have been calling that day, as we know at Globe Derby. But, so there are times where if your breath's not right, that can make it very challenging. So again, it's about preparation. Make sure you're there, ready to go. And look, no one likes making mistakes. I think that's the real bugbear for me when I was race calling. If you get a photo wrong, we're only human. We're not machines. We're not computers. So you've got to make mistakes over the journey. But if you get one wrong early in the day, it sort of sits with you for the whole program. And then if there's another close finish coming up later in the day, you sort of, do I have a go? Do you want to get 2 wrong on one day? So, yeah.
So that's what's happened in terms of embarrassing moments. You sort of called the wrong horse or the wrong person.
Yeah, not so much the wrong horse, but Bevo and Mac are hitting the line locked together, and I think Bevo's just won. But if the photo goes the other way and Mac gets it, people are, they're trusting you, they're listening, and then they actually blame you that, you said it won, but it didn't. But actually, that was just my opinion. Really, what my opinion is doesn't count for anything. It's what the judges says that matters, but people still don't really take it on board.
Especially when they've got money on it as well, so it's a tough gig. Yeah, no, you do a wonderful job, that's for sure. So, speaking of wonderful jobs, earlier in this year it was so well deserved. You won the Matrice Award, and you're a very modest man, Tez. This award's been won by McAuliffe Diva, Leon McDonald, the list goes on. What did it sort of feel like when you found out your name, was basically given to that award? And did it sort of?
Yeah, huge
honour.
Yeah, huge honour, and I was totally overwhelmed by it. Look, wasn't expecting it. I was there on the night actually. With my in-laws, my father-in-law Leon McDonald and brother-in-law Andrew Lewis. They had Dallasan, who was in contention for the the Horse of the Year title, so that's why I thought I was going along, just to give some family support. But as it turned out, they knew this was coming my way, and yeah, look, it was a tremendous honour. As you said, the names that have been fortunate to appear on that honour board for the Matrice Award, they're staggering. All of the greats, Colin Hayes, and you mentioned McAuliffe Diva. There's some incredible names on there. So yeah, look, overwhelming. Wasn't expecting it, but very proud.
And earlier on this year, speaking of how good you are, Tez, this is just unbelievable reading this story. Tim Edwards, he was calling for, I think it was Sky Racing, and the last 4 calls up at Naracoorte, he basically was just buggered. So I think he was unwell, and you stepped in and called 4 races in a row, plus all your preparation for for Racing.com as well. How the heck did you do it?
Yeah, look, I was probably a little bit lucky. There were only small fields on the day, and look, I know the horses well enough to trust, my ability to get by calling them. So I said to Tim, and he was there actually with his dad, and I said, look, just go. I'll be able to handle it. So I just simply called it off the monitor. It probably got more publicity than it deserved. Really, it wasn't that big a deal, but I enjoyed it actually, to get behind the mic once again.
That's unbelievable. Well done. And to just end on a bit of a sad note, a close friend of yours, Belinda Price, is doing it a bit tough at the moment, and you did a really wonderful interview just recently. Tell us about your relationship with Belinda and how she's going.
Yeah, so Belinda married to Simon Price, who was one of the leading riders here in South Australia for many, many years, and now 2 of their children, Will in Melbourne and Ben here in Adelaide, are doing great things, forging their own careers in the saddle. So, and they've got a beautiful daughter, Abby, as well. But yeah, Belinda had the shock news only in recent months that she's battling pancreatic cancer. So I actually was driving home from the Gawler races on a Wednesday, and I was just thinking about, it's tough enough for the family with what Belinda's going through, but also for the boys that ride in a really tough game, Will and Ben, and in the back of their minds are also dealing with the fact that their mum's really unwell. So I actually said to Belinda, I rang her the next day and said, look, I was wondering if you wanted to share your story, and she's much loved in the racing industry, apart from with all of her friends as well. And Belinda was only too happy to do the story with me. So for Racing.com, we went along and we filmed an interview with Belinda. She had Abby with her as well, her daughter, and the story came up fantastic. And we just our thoughts and prayers are with Belinda, and as she fights the battle. And it was just more making people aware of what the boys are dealing with as well, because it is a tough game. I spoke about the fact, as a caller, I hate it when you make a mistake and then people get into you, but, and the same thing, there's plenty of grandstand jockeys out there, and they feel a jockey hasn't ridden the perfect race, they're only too happy, and the keyboard warriors who sit behind false identities and tap away and have a crack at jockeys or trotting drivers or whatever. It can be pretty cruel, and I just thought it was nice to let maybe the general public know exactly what else is going on in the lives of these fine 2 young men.
No, well said and well done. And actually, a bit ago, before we let you go, Tez, I'm involved with the Mount Barker Courier as a journalist up there, and one of the big topics at the moment, well, not just up there in the hills, but around South Australia, around the racing fraternity, is of course the Oakbank races next year, and with the jumps being removed, and obviously there's a lot of people that are not happy about it, and tourism in the hills is obviously going to get affected by it as well. And people from the accommodation side of things in the hills are very disappointed by the situation. What's your take on it? And could we see it being overturned? Or?
Oh, I'd be very surprised. Racing SA have been strong in their opinion that jumps racing is done in this state. Jumps racing's been dying in this state for a long, long time. I've got to say, you asked me about my favourite memories as a broadcaster, and I mentioned the Great Mare Black Caviar, but my favourite meeting to work at was always Oakbank as a broadcaster. I went along there as a young fellow and watched the races, and then was fortunate enough to start working there. Once upon a time there were 2 callers at Oakbank because they go behind the hill, and the main broadcast position can't see the callers for probably 300 or 400 metres, so they would switch to the caller on the hill, and that's where my broadcasting journey began at Oakbank, and then eventually I took up the prime position as the main broadcaster. But I saw the crowds start to fall away dramatically. Once upon a time they would around 40,000 on the Saturday and even bigger on the Monday. The Monday crowd has really diminished and the Saturday likewise with it. But not only that, the field sizes have fallen away as well. The last 5 Great Easterns, the signature race there at Oakbank, there's been 4 fields of 5 and 1 field of 7. And in those fields, 2 horses ran in all 5. So we only really have, I'll give you a great example. This year there were 12 jumps races run in South Australia for a total of 65 runners in those 12 races. 3 South Australian stables were represented. Grant Young and Barry Brook had the bulk of them. One other trainer had 1 runner. There is no jumps rider here in South Australia. So effectively, it's an industry which is basically being put on for really the Victorians to come across and pinch our money. But and look, I'm sad by it because I loved jumps racing. I loved broadcasting. I've got some incredible memories working there. But most of the noise, I can hear it from locals that are heavily involved in the game. And I touched on Grant Young and Barry Brook and some of the greats, Francis Nelson, John Glatz, but most of the noise is coming from across the border from Victoria, where they are the lone jumping state in this country. We don't have jumping races in New South Wales, Queensland, Western Australia. They did have it in Tasmania, that's gone by the wayside, and now Racing SA have made the decision to let it go here in SA. Oakbank, I don't think it's the end for Oakbank. I'm confident that they can re-energise the carnival and still make it great, but there's a bit to play out there because it seems that there is going to be a special general meeting called and they're going to try and overturn the current committee, and they're going to put in a committee that basically want jumps racing, but ultimately the decision is with Racing SA. Oakbank may demand it, but Racing SA have to program it, and Racing SA saying strongly that that's it. They're not going to be programming jumps racing again in this state. So I still think, I still believe Oakbank can work, and it's up to, you've got to reinvent the wheel sometimes, and that's what the committee need to do now, and with that, Oakbank can survive and the hills can flourish.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I mean, we spoke about this off air before, about the Balaclava Cup and Clare and all these other regional meets, and, they get great crowds there, so I don't see why they can't just because there's no jumps racing, why they can't still get big crowds. People go away and have a weekend up there for Easter. It's fantastic up there, Ted. So,
well, it hasn't happened yet. So people are saying that it's not going to happen. Well, you haven't given it the opportunity yet. Let's see what happens in 2022, and let's see what the crowds are like, and let's see what actually happens.
Absolutely, because there could be a lot of people that didn't want to go along to Oakbank because they were against because of the cruelty to animals, so to speak, and they might get more people going along. So,
well, Bevo, it's a big thing that we've had to deal with. The protesters are there every year. Every year there's jumps races wherever they're held. The protesters are there. They're perched around the track on ladders with cameras to take a picture of a horse falling and maybe unfortunately getting hurt, and then it'll bob up on the news service that night with either Channel 7, 9, 10 or Channel 2 or all of them. And is that the only way racing can get on the TV news from a story like that?
Ridiculous, yeah.
When there's so many great stories out there.
100%, yeah. No, I couldn't agree with you more, mate. So, and a good way to end on a positive, I think. So, hey, Terry McAuliffe, thanks so much today for joining us, Legends of Bevo, mate. Thanks to the Junction Hotel as well, and to Matt Peel, who did a great job filming for us. We look forward to speaking in the future, Tez, and look forward to a big race, the Race that Stops Nation on Tuesday.
Yeah, good luck with whatever you're backing on Tuesday in the Melbourne Cup.